Today we're going to learn how to find the measures of variation. This is kind of a lengthy set of notes, so let's go ahead and get started. It says find measures of variation, so this is something to think about, kind of a review to get our brains turning. It says Jamie asked her classmates how many glasses of water they drink on a typical day. What is the median of the data set? Well, if you look over here, we've got a dot plot. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need to write down our data so we can find the median. And remember, the median is the middle of your data set, and so it needs to be in numerical order. So I have 0, 0, 0. I have 3 X's on 0, which means 3 people drink 0 glasses of water a day. Then I have 4 ones. Then I have 4 twos, which means 4 people drink 2 glasses of water a day. And then 3, 4, 5. All right, so there's what my data set looks like. And then remember, to find the median, I just work my way in. So I'm going to kind of show you how to do this. So I am finding the middle of my data set, and I just go from each end until I get to the middle. So I'm going to cross them off. And then I get to my data, the middle, my data is right there. The middle of my data is right there. And then if I look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 data points on the left side of that bar. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 data points on the right side of that bar. So there is the middle, which means my median is 2. All right, then it says organize the data into 2 groups, the top half and the bottom half. We've already done that. How many data values are in each group? And I already counted them out for you. There are 8 data values in each group. And what that means is in the lower half, so use a different color here. This is the lower half of my data. There's 8 data values. And then this is the upper half of my data, and there's 8 values in that as well. All right, then the next question says, what is the median of each group? So I'm going to look at the lower half of my data, which is this blue line here, and then I'm going to find the median of that. So just like before, I'm going to work my way into the middle. And the median is in between 1 and 1. So the lower half, my median is 1. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the upper half. I'm going to work my way into the middle. And so there is the middle of my upper half of my data. And how I do that is I find the average, but I know the middle between 3 and 4 is 3.5. Okay, then the last question says find the difference between the 2 numbers from number 3. So if I take 3.5 minus 1, I get 2.5. This part of the notes, you really didn't need me. That's something that you should have been able to work through on your own. All right, you may want to pause the video and write some of this down, because this is a lot and this is very important. That's why it's called a key concept. But the median of the lower half of the data, that's what we found in that little think about, is called the lower quartile. The median of the upper half is called the upper quartile. And then kind of the star, what I really want you to think about is when you're finding the median, the lower quartile, and the upper quartile, you have divided your data into fourths or quartiles. And think about, like, there's 4 quarters and a dollar. Quad means 4. So think about that QUA, that prefix, that means fourths. All right, and so if you kind of have an understanding of what the word means, it kind of makes the concept a little bit easier. So let's look at our example, and again, if you need to pause the video to get this down, you should definitely do that. So we're going to we're going to first find our median. So you always have to find your median, and then we work our way into the middle. So here is my median. and I'll just label that median. All right, and then we're going to find the lower quartile. And I start at the median and I work my way in. There's my lower quartile. Then I'll do the same thing for my upper quartile. Start at my median and then divide my data, and there's my upper quartile. And so then if you look, you have your data is divided into fourths. Like you have like this part right here, then this part. Oh, I'm trying to think here. All right, there, I fixed it. So if you look, I've divided my data into fourths, where these yellow lines are. There's one part of my data, second part of my data, third part of my data, fourth part of my data. So it has been divided into fourths. That's what the median, the lower quartile, and the upper quartile do. All right, measures of variation is our first vocabulary word, and measures of variation is used to describe how your data is distributed. So it's the distribution of your data. So examples of measures of variation include range, quartiles, and then the interquartile range, which is abbreviated IQR. Right, and we're going to define those words in just a second. But the measures of variation describes how your data is distributed. All right, your range is the difference between your greatest and your least data value. So it's your greatest minus your least, and you should know that. You've been doing range for a really long time now. We've already talked about quartiles. Quartiles are values that divide the data set into 4 equal parts. So we've already talked about that. Your lower quartile is the median of the lower half of a set of data. So you're going to find the median, and then the lower half of your data, you're going to find the median of that. We've already talked about upper quartile. Upper quartile is the median of the upper half of your data set. All right, the interquartile range, it's kind of a hard definition to wrap your mind around, and this may not make sense for a couple more lessons. How you find it is relatively easy, but the definition itself might be a little bit difficult, but it will make sense in a couple lessons. So 1/4 of the data lie below the lower quartile, 1/4 lie above the upper quartile, and we looked at that when I divided our data using those gold bars. So 1/4 was below, 1/4, so remember that. But then the interquartile range is 1/2 of the data lie between the lower quartile and the upper quartile. This is your IQR, your interquartile range. So to find the interquartile range, you take upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So how you find it is relatively easy, but the definition is kind of complicated, and it will make sense in a couple of lessons. All right, so an outlier is a data value that is either much greater or much less than the median. If the data value is more than 1.5 times the value of the IQR beyond the quartiles, it's an outlier. And this was new for me, so it's probably new for you as well. We talk about in science, oh, that data point is an outlier, and I think we use that term without really knowing what the definition means. So we will look at a couple of examples, how to find an outlier, and if a data point really and truly is an outlier. But it needs to be 1.5 times the value of the IQR beyond the quartile values. So we'll look at some examples, and that will help clear that definition up. All right, so we're finally to an example 1, find the measures of the variation. So we need to find the measures of variation for the data shown over in the table. And remember one of our measures of variation is the range. and the range is the high minus the low. So for this example, I have 70 minus 1. So my range for this example is 69. Then the next thing I need to find is my median, my upper quartiles, and my lower quartiles, and my IQR. So go ahead and put the data in order from biggest to smallest and find your median, and then we'll pick up in just a second. Okay, so I found my median. Then I'm going to find my lower quartile, which is the middle of my lower half. So there's my lower quartile. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my upper quartile. And there's my upper quartile. So my range is 69. Lower quartile is 8. Upper quartile is 50. I forgot to write down my median. My median is 27.5. So how I figured that is I added 30 plus 25 and divided by 2. And then my inner quartile range is going to be 50 minus 8, which is 42. Alright, and then I included a study tip right here. If the inner quartile range is low, the middle of your data are grouped closely together. So go ahead and do the on your own and then come back and check your answers. Alright, so it says determine the measures of variation for the data in the table shown over here. The measures of variation include the range, median, lower quartile, upper quartile, and then the inner quartile range. Alright, so I put my data in order from smallest to biggest. I found my range. My range is my big minus my small, and that's 15. And then I'm going to find the rest of those, and you can come back and check your answers. Alright, so I found my median. My median is halfway between 60 and 61, which is 60.5. My lower quartile is 58. My upper quartile is 64. And then my inner quartile range is 64 minus 58, which is 6. So if something about that does not make sense, then come see me in the morning. Okay, so find the outlier. I feel like this is a little bit complicated and we won't do this very often, but I just want you to kind of see how it's done. So in order to find the outlier, the first thing that you have to do is find the IQR. So you've had enough experience to do that, so go ahead and find the IQR and then come back and check your work. Okay, so what I did is I found the median, then I found my lower quartile, which is 48. Then I found my upper quartile, which is 63. 63 minus 48 is 15. So I've done step 1 in the algorithm at the bottom. Then step 2 is I'm going to take the IQR, which is 15, times 1.5. So do that on your calculator. 15 times 1.5 is 22.5. So then step 3, and I'm going to do that down here at the bottom. I'm going to take my lower quartile, so my lower quartile is 48 minus 22.5, which is that 1.5 times my 1.5 times my IQR, and then I do that on a calculator and I get 25.5. Then I'm going to do my upper quartile, which is 63, plus that 22.5. And I get 85.5. Alright, so then I look, and if there's a number that's less than 25.5 or greater than 85.5, those are my outliers. So when I come up to my data, 23 is less than the 25.5, so 23 is an outlier. And then when I look at the upper end of my data, there's nothing bigger than 85.5, so 23 is my outlier. Okay, so when you look at the on your own, the first thing that you need to do is find your IQR. So I found my median. My lower quartile is between 88 and 251, so it's 169.5. My upper quartile is 737.5. IQR is upper quartile minus lower quartile, which is your 568, times 1.5 equals 852. Then when you work through the rest of the example, there are no outliers in this data. Okay, so example 3 says the table shows a set of science scores on a science test in 2 different classrooms. Compare and contrast their measures of variation. So I've gone ahead and found the measures of variation for room A. I've found the range and I've found the IQR. And then I'm going to do the same thing for room B. And I've also found the median. The median is 80. So go ahead and do that, and then we can look at the comparison and the contrasting. All right, so I have found the IQR. Whoops, I forgot to write it down. 90 minus 69 is 21. And I found the range for room B. So both classes have a range of 35. So that's a comparison. Room A has an IQR of 20, and room B has an IQR of 21. Slight differences in the median and upper quartile and lower quartile, but it's not significant. So, no major differences in upper quartile, lower quartile. All right, go ahead and do the on your own, and we will check the on your own tomorrow in class.